This all started for us as a television project. The BBC was about to create a whole series of new television channels. How they were going to be branded was going to be a very important issue.
At exactly the same time, Corporate Affairs was looking at the whole visual image of the corporation to see if it was capable of serving all the corporation's needs into the 21st century. Clearly, it made sense for the two projects to become one. This film is a summary of progress to date. Not the full story, but a broad explanation of the vision and the way forward.
The way the BBC designs its logos for television brands at the moment revolves around three elements: corporate logo, brand name or numeral, and personality of the brand. So the reason BBC World uses this typeface is because it reflects the channel's output, news and information. This approach is also used for the radio networks: BBC Radio, a numeral with personality, and finally, the frequency. But these aren't the only logos the BBC owns. I know. In fact, under the prevailing branding system, if it's got a name, it's got a logo. There's a logo for locations, the shop has a logo, even the club has a logo. This results in the BBC being the proud owner of zillions of logos.
With the BBC about to play a leading role in the digital revolution, the team realized that following the existing branding system for all the new BBC channels and services would mean simply adding more and more logos.
The problem with zillions of logos for any corporation is that they weaken the core brand. Not only that, but they cost a lot of money, between $2,500 and $6,000 each. At the time we got involved in this project, the BBC was generating about 2 logos a week.
Obviously, it was time to call a halt and review the whole process.
The first thing we needed to do was to ask the question, what's the most important part of the identity? And obviously, it's these 3 letters. More than anything else, they represent a famous brand. They're associated with quality, integrity, and all the positive values of the organization.
The next stage was to consider the existing brand logo. After all, it focuses on the BBC initials. So what's the problem?
Well, actually, there are 4 sets of problems. Firstly, there are the technical problems. It doesn't work on screen, because when reduced, the little lines disappear, and so do the counters. That's the little bits in the center of the letters. And off-screen, when it's a color logo on a color photograph, it's again possible to disappear. There are other technical problems, but these are problems enough.
The team also identified strategic design problems.
Now, if this looks vaguely familiar, that's because it's meant to. It has its roots in the 60s, or was it the 50s? But the problem is that bringing elements of the design across to this new logo, the designers also imported a specific period feel. Not quite the values you want for a global corporation going into the 21st century.
The logo didn't work tactically either, alongside other BBC services and products.
The problem here is that you can never get the brand names to look comfortable alongside the diagonal logo. See what I mean?
Finally, the logo didn't work financially.
It's a 4-color letterhead at its cheapest, but you also have 7-color and even 10-color letterheads, and that costs.
Before redesigning the BBC corporate logo, certain criteria had to be established. Technically, it would have to work in all media, from television, laptops and websites to a range of printing processes. Strategically, it needed to avoid being identified with any particular era. Tactically, it would need to work with all the BBC output areas, accommodating new ones, be simple to manage, and sit alongside all the different brand personalities. Financially, it would have to be less expensive to produce. Finally, there was an aesthetic consideration. The actual standard of design would have to be at a world-class level.
So, with all this criteria in mind, we were in the market for a typeface. We settled on Gill Sans, not surprisingly designed by a man called Eric Gill. He was a master type designer who was most famous around about the 1930s. He was also a wonderful sculptor, and rather appropriately, you can find his sculptures around Broadcasting House. Eric Gill also represents that high standard of craftsmanship for which Britain and the BBC are renowned throughout the world. This is what we call the Lovey argument. For those of us for whom the creative product is important, a very convincing argument it is too. But even for the loveliest of the lovies amongst us, the main reason was far more practical. The BBC needed a typeface that was robust and elegant. Gill fits the bill to a T, you might say.
As a result, what was recommended was a very simple but highly significant change from this to this.
By doing this, we solve all the technical problems in one hit. No fine lines, no disappearing counters. As you can see, we've kept the boxes and straightened them up. If we'd used a completely different shape to contain the letters, the result would have looked more like the Banstead Borough Council or the Big Biro Company. It would have lost its BBC-ness.
The team realized that neither the aesthetic nor the technical arguments on their own would be reason enough to justify a project as big as a wholesale change in corporate identity.
However, the most compelling argument for changing the logo is this. What we do about this is dependent on the jobs it has to do. It has a corporate job, a nation's job, a region's job. It needs to work with the directorates. It has a commercial job. Then come the brands, TV brands, radio brands, and local radio brands. Now, even if you forget the aesthetics for a minute, this system delivers two benefits. One, it all looks like it comes from the same organisation. And two, you can add any name you like to it after the BBC logo. What it doesn't deliver is personality. So for the brands, we need to inject personality another way. When you look at consumer brands, this is precisely how they approach the problem.
Levi's is a highly successful and visible consumer brand, which has a series of brand values which it wants to communicate to its target markets. The Levi's logo itself does not communicate all these values. That task is left to the marketing.
Like Levi's, we didn't try to put all the personality into the logo, but recognised that each BBC brand would have a property of its own to do that job. In the case of BBC Two, what the audience enjoys are the antics of the Twos, not the logo design. The Twos are famous, they communicate emotionally, and it's through them that people decide what they feel about the channel. So we'll keep Twos and simply add the BBC Two logo. The other new channels can develop their own properties as required, without destroying the consistency of the corporate identity.
The new brand identity also works for all the other on-screen elements, including the dog, the digital on-screen graphic in the top left-hand corner of the screen, program menus, and uses the same type for all channels, centered to accommodate widescreen.
All this means two things. Firstly, it means a proportion of all BBC television channels in the future have been designed right now. The use of the logo and the typeface have already been determined. All that needs to be devised is the channel property. The effect of this will be that the channel identities will be considerably cheaper to produce. And the second benefit is that the BBC will have a way of doing television channels. The channel's typography consistent, but all the channel's personalities different.
This principle applies to all areas of the BBC, whether TV or radio. The new system also translates into print as a much simpler corporate styling, which delivers an enormous cost saving to the corporation. It also works on books and magazines, on websites and multimedia. In short, on anything that may be part of the BBC, both now and in the future.